with our guest for the day, Mr. Charu Sharma. My name is PILLAI. I am the director of the PILLAI FIFA CIES Executive Programme in Sports Management, the first of its kind executive sports management course in India. This program is jointly conducted by the PILLAI Group in Mumbai and the world governing football body FIFA and the Center for International Sports Studies CIES, both based out of Switzerland. Before we start, I would just like to give you a brief introduction to our event and why we felt it was important to have this discussion here today. It is a privilege to have one of India's biggest authorities on sports, Mr. Charu Sharma, here with us today. We have titled this discussion with him as Rebooting Sports in the Post-COVID World, because it is a discussion that is very much needed in these times. The coronavirus has decimated industries across the world as we know it, but sports is also one of the biggest to suffer. There might be people who say that having a discussion on sports in these times is really important. Like, aren't there more important things? To them, I would say that yes, there might be more important things than sports, but sports cannot be ignored. There is a reason why bringing back sports is a hot topic all over the world. Presidents keep on talking about sports in their addresses. People want to know when will sports be back in their country. That's because sports is a tool that unites people. It brings people together. It also takes their minds off the harsh realities of the world that we are living in these days. Maybe for a little bit, but it does. But for me, the most important aspect is that the sports industry employs millions of people around the world and is one of the fastest growing industries. And so just how we talk about restarting industries and restarting factories, restarting sports is also an important discussion to have because it is the livelihood of millions of people out there. And what's the best way to restart sports, and more importantly, what's the safest way? I will let our experts today discuss on that. And I'm really happy to have Nikhil Sharma with us here today to host this event. He's the CEO of zlait Sports Management, sports infrastructure and athlete management company in India. And we're really happy to have both of you here. Thank you, Charu Sharma, for being with us, and thank you, Nikhil. So over to you, Nikhil.
Thank you so much, Pranav. I think it's thank you so much to FIFA CIES PILLAI Executive Programme in Sports Management. I'm really honored and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Why? Because I'm such a huge fan of Charu Sharma. Right before I start doing this, I received a write-up on introducing Charu Sharma, but I thought I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it of my memories of growing up, of falling in love with sports, and he has such a big role to play in it, to a role in introducing sports to us. In when we watch the Olympics or the Asian Games or so many other sporting events, there were so many events that we didn't even know about. It could be water polo, fencing, diving, shooting. We didn't know the difference between a double trap and a pistol shooting and a rifle shoot. Always there as always was the storyteller for introducing so many kids to the sporting world, and his voice still resonates with me whenever I see sporting events being held, and I think he's synonymous. And then, of course, around 2014, I was in Bombay and Mumbai, as a lot of you call it, and we were planning to have the Indian Super League, which was starting soon. And a friend of ours said, "Why don't you come over to the Worli Dome? And there's a Pro Kabaddi League starting." And my first reaction was, "Really? A Pro Kabaddi League? Is Kabaddi that popular?" And then, of course, things changed, and we know the rest, as they say, is history. And Pro Kabaddi League has gone on to become such a huge rage. And in fact, at this point in time, in a country where cricket is the #1 sport, Pro Kabaddi is such a close competitor to the IPL. So Charu Sharma, Charu sir, and as you asked me to say,
Charu. That's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being you, for introducing us to the sport. I really look forward to this conversation with you. Starting off, why don't we talk about your interaction with sports and sportscasting? Because right around the time that you would have started, sportscasting would have just become its nascent stage, wherein Indians were talking about the sport, that Indians were participating or not, the World Cup, etc. And of course, we want all of our listeners to pose questions to Charu, Sir Charu. And I have a copy of my book that the best question gets to a signed copy. So, Charu sir, why don't we start off with sportscasting and your experiences with it?
Well, I feel like asking the first or the best question to get a copy of that book. But anyway, may the best question win it. Nikhil, thank you so much for your introduction. It meant a lot that came from the heart. And if you can't hear me, can somebody confirm that you're hearing me, or how does it work? Nikhil, can you hear me? And Pranav, can somebody confirm
yes,
that you're
hearing me? Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. So I think Nikhil's the only one with a problem right now. Nikhil, you better sort it quickly. Should we wait a few seconds for Nikhil to sort it and give us a thumbs up? Because if he's missing, then I think we should all pack up and go home. Nikhil, you need to do something about your connection, and I'll take a couple of sips of tea to make sure that we're okay. Don't be frazzled, Nikhil. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Fiddle around a bit and get your connection going again, which was iffy anyway because you were breaking up. And while he tries, Nikhil, thumbs up. Can you hear me or not? Not yet. Okay, never mind. We'll hope that he can get back quickly enough. Try to remove whose earphones, me or Nikhil's? Nikhil's. Okay, so I'm going to start out with what Nikhil asked, and many of you may know, may not know. I have always been a sportsman. I still play a lot of sports, and I hope I eventually, pass away on the sporting field. And it's a morbid thought, but I mean, that's what I love because that's who I am. But I started out very early, and because I was at Mayo College in Ajmer, which has a huge campus and offers many sporting facilities, we got exposed to just about every sport very quickly. Now, it's just a coincidence that my early forte was springboard diving, and I excelled in springboard diving. For Nikhil, are you back? Are you going to give us a thumbs up? Maybe not yet. Okay, we'll see. So diving was my forte earlier on. And the minute you have an early forte at a young age, what it does mean is that you're spending a lot of time on one sport and are not getting enough time for other sports, which is fine. I mean, it's not a pity or whatever, because those days, even cricket in the 70s was not something you'd make a living out of. So I did very well in one sport, and I had the good fortune to be playing many others as well, which of course proved to be a very important part of my life, because when we get into commentary later on, it's a question of also having played everything, not just having read or appreciated, but played. So Nikhil, it looks like you're nodding your head and you're back. Give me a thumbs up. I can't hear you, but at least we're halfway there. You can hear me. That's all right. Times are tough. What can I say for everybody technologically? So Nikhil, can I hear you? Can you say something? No, we'll give him more time. Okay, so that is how sports started out at a very early age for me. And if every once in a while I am a little immodest, I do beg your pardon. I do beg your forgiveness. But I was like the junior national under 16 champion when I was virtually 10 or just about 11. So that's how early I started. And also meant that I retired very early at the ripe old age of 19. That's all I was when I stopped diving. Because after all, one has to be true to one sport, honest with oneself. Springboard diving was never going to lead me to a career or a livelihood, which is why it had to go at the time it went. Of course, it did a lot for me, got me college admissions, got me scholarships, got me to many places, but then it had to go, so it went. And of course, when it went, it gave me a lot more time to play everything else, which was just lying in the cupboard at that point of time. So my multi-sport activities continued. And what it did do is when in 1982 the Asian Games were held in India, Doordarshan being the only channel then, advertised in 1981 for auditions for commentators who were, past national champs, international players and stuff like that. And I got pushed into it, which is the truth, because was there a deep-seated need to be a commentator? No, because those days, remember, even commentary was very, very amateur. in that it was not something that you could earn a livelihood out of, because it was all stipendary and honorarium-based payments and rewards. So yes, I started out very early. 1982 was the big revolution in sport and television in India, because color television came in and television became a thing to have. And therefore, of course, the Asian Games got tremendous, should I say, visibility and importance at that point of time. And that led to a lot of regular commentary for many sports, because when the networks realized that I was equally familiar with many sports and played them and lived them and breathed them, that meant a wide variety of assignments. And that carried on despite the fact that I had a corporate career, because like I said, you could make a livelihood in the world of sport at that point of time, in commentary as well, till the country opened up in the early 90s. And then, of course, private television came to India, sports television came to India, and there I was already and waiting and trained and willing and able. And that's how my professional commentary career started in the early 90s, because that's when commentary became something that was something that you could earn a livelihood out of. And the rest is all, I suppose, history, because I stayed with it. And I have some pleasure in not accurately, but suggesting that I was the first professional commentator, because I gave everything else up and did only commentary assignments, which was a bold move then, because it was only gradually picking up in the early 90s. And not much more about that, because there's nothing to do with sports post-COVID. But that's just a quick historical background. And I was fortunate, being very multi-sport, that assignments come from various sports at various levels, whether it's the highest or not, or you mentioned the Olympics and Asian Games, fabulous to cover those, but many, many other major international sports as well. And because one had also played a lot of cricket, not that one played for the country, because you can only, like I said, focus on a sport early on in life. That too was an important aspect, and I like cricket just as much as any other sport, and which is why, kabaddi, because a lot of people said, where's cricket and golf your favorite, and where's kabaddi? Now those are very long stories, and Nikhil, if you start me off on the Pro Kabaddi League, we're going to take another 6 hours there, and we'll never be able to complete this program. But if you are back and if you can hear me, I'd love to hear your voice, because you were off for a while.
I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying your conversation as of now. But I have to ask you about Pro Kabaddi. There is no way we are doing this conversation without Pro Kabaddi, because as students, I call myself a student of sports management, that was really ahead of the curve. There is absolutely no doubt about the fact that Pro Kabaddi essentially brought in a revolution of sort, because before that, non-cricket sporting leagues, they still are not that established. So what was it about? What was this brilliant move of yours that became such a huge
Nikhil, I mean, you have to announce that, because it's such a long story. How do I tell it in a month? I need 6 months. But anyway, it actually started out because of my connection with commentary. So it's very much a commentary-based start, where I was called to the Asian Games in 2006 in Doha to commentate, do the world feed, which is like the international sound and the commentary that goes out with the pictures. It's called the world feed, by an organization that was hired by the Asian Games organizing committee to commentate for Kabaddi, because in Doha they had sufficient funds to provide international commentary for every sport. In the Asian Games before that, all the rest of the versions, because Kabaddi was a part of Asian Games since 1990, there was no real international commentary given, because it was just the coverage that was sent out, and you can do your own commentary or not if you wish. So in that sense, 2006 was a bit of a landmark Asian Games, and I was, somebody contacted me in their wisdom, and I was very happy to do the assignment. So 2 or 3 things happened then. One, of course, I said, well, if I have to do commentary for Kabaddi, which I, of course, haven't, though all of us have had early exposure to the game, I went around India doing a lot of homework, because homework for commentators is a huge key, very, very important. And therefore, it gave me an appreciation of not only the sport and how robust and athletic and healthy and everybody else, all the rest of these things that were involved in Kabaddi, but also how popular it was in many, many parts of the country. Even in urban areas where Kabaddi tournaments were held, they were always jam-packed. So I said, wow, why is the sport in the shadows? Because if everybody loves it, and of course it's a great sport, and I knew, of course, that it'll do very well on television because it's a small arena, so there are many aspects to it which I knew would be fantastic. Then, of course, I went to the Asian Games and realized that it was the first sport to sell out. And many other fellow commentators and other media people, thousands of them there, we used to meet and they used to say, hey, listen, what's with this game? Tell us more, because, it's very, very exciting, great to watch, and we can't get a seat because it's all full. So then I realized, well, it's not just me. I'm not a one person appreciation band. I mean, many people seem to be really fond of the game, but it just has not found its space, strangely enough. That's when I came back and told the person I'm very close to, related, Anand Mahindra. I said, Anand, listen, it's a great sport. You should take it up, support it, help it, make it grow. Because, I mean, after all, you are known as a very renowned, reputed indigenous entrepreneur. And maybe this will tie in very well with you and your products and your thought process. And let's just kind of say that it took very long to, for all of this to fall into place, because then all of a sudden we fast forward 4 years to Guangzhou, the Asian Games again in 2010, when I was called upon once again to do the World Beat commentary. And again, I came back and I told him, I said, listen, we just have to do something about it, because of course, 2 or 3 things have changed. One, of course, the Kabaddi fraternity and the federation trusted me in my connection with the game. And in 2008, a very important aspect of Indian sport changed, in that the IPL happened, which also is very closely connected with, but that's another story. And so he said, yeah, you've been telling me for 4 years, do something, whatever. We've made a few inroads. We try to find out whether we can do something or not, but it's not quite gelling, not quite working out. So he said, now that the IPL has started, and of course he got input from some other people as well, he said, Charu, if you're so keen to take the sport forward because of various reasons, and I can give you those reasons now, why don't we do a league? Own a league, do a league, and take the sport forward, because then we'll be in control of taking it forward. I said, gosh, I mean, that's a real major undertaking. I mean, but then I said, now that I've been championing the cause of Kabaddi for so long, I can't back out now. So I said, okay, if you think that's the way forward, let's do it. And so then I promised to do all the running around, and he was, of course, of immense support. And I told him, eventually, when we start getting owners, you'll have to make a few calls, because we want very reputed owners coming to the league, which is another story. So like I said, there are many stories. But really, I mean, the combination of factors that made me realize Kabaddi would do really well is my knowledge of sport and television put together in one instrument, one crucible, one ball. And I said, this is the kind of sport which is obviously full contact. It has a lot of popularity. It has a lot of appeal. It has a lot of visual attraction. It is easy to cover on television because it's a small arena. You can cover it really well. You can go up close. You can show people's emotions, and and people like this kind of sport. So there's everything possible. If there was, say, 15 criteria for a sport to do well and succeed, then Kabaddi probably met 13 or 14. But the 1 or 2 areas which were a really big problem at that point of time, and to an extent they still are a problem, is the perception. The perception of the sport in India, its own home ground, was unfortunately, something that we had to battle very hard against, because a lot of the urban population, particularly, and others, didn't quite see it in a positive light. And now, as you know, to bust through a 30-foot wall, it takes a lot of hard work, brick by brick. So that's why it took so long.
And a bloody nose as well.
Yeah, from that, true. We wipe the blood out again. But it took 4 years to mount it, only because I didn't have a big team. I don't want a big team, because, it was a passion project, as it were. And, you needed people to believe in what they were doing rather than just a job. But I knew one thing, and that was the one thing that kept me going, because every day, as you can imagine, I had lots of thoughts about, am I really on the right path? What am I doing? Because people are treating Charu Sharma as some sort of a madman, and it kind of hurt, as you said, bloody noses as well. But I knew that if we could get it on track, on the road, then after the first day, first show, the world of Kabaddi and the world of sport would change forever. And that's why we call it the boldest, biggest revolution in the sport. You use the word revolution. I like that, because it truly was one. It took a lot of crusading, a lot of convincing, but any project does. I mean,
yes.
Nobody does it too easy. So I'm not saying I worked any harder than anybody else who started out a wildly left field idea. But I knew it would do very well, and touch what it did. So combination of many factors, and we can go into all of that later. But that's the story of why I wanted, in a word, respect back into the game. And however big or small it is now, you mentioned very close to cricket, is not. It takes much more time. But I think the respect is back in the game from just about every part of India's society, and perhaps even the globe, wherever people are watching it. I get reports every once in a while of some, developed country person from the east or the west or the south or Africa or somewhere saying, hey, I caught a bit of that. It was fabulous. Tell me more about it. So I know that people are respecting, it makes people sit up and respect the game. And that is the ultimate tribute to the game itself, to put it on the pedestal where people respect it. You may like it, not like it, you may watch it, not watch it, but I think people respect what's going on. And of course, it's done wonders for the people who play the game, who for thousands of years, well, at least the last few years, were plying their trade with very little or no reward. And I think, once the sport turns professional, the whole sporting ecology turns around of that sport. It suddenly becomes aspirational. Thousands of people, hundreds of people join it. The bottom of the pyramid increases as well. And it becomes news because it's a profession. People can earn a livelihood out of it. The same with me.
Yes.
I was doing commentary from 82 to 92 without any real award or reward. When, of course, remuneration came in the early 90s because of liberalization, globalization, and overseas channels. Suddenly, it's like a dam that bursts or floodgates that open. And that's what happened.
You said, let's not talk about the owners, but I wanted to very quickly kind of go into the business side of things. Because luckily, as an outsider, I looked at how robust the business was. One, if you came in once, the fees for entry wasn't much. Now, whether you want to share those numbers or no, that's up to you. I know them. But the fees of getting in wasn't much. The people were very reputed and robust. They stayed on for 3 years. So, because the cost was not exceptional, the cash flow burn wasn't like how it was in a lot of other leagues. Because it was such a television sport, people, one, they saw it. Two, I've never seen that kind of impact with people who have no relation with sports. I met so many people, including women, who would say, we just love the energy with the sport. And, whether they're in the arena or at their homes, you could watch it for 15 minutes, and because it's end-to-end, people enjoy it a lot. Very quickly, would you be able to talk about the business side of things? How did you build such a robust, and at that point in time, I think the athletes weren't expensive, but they were good looking. I can now say that they're expensive. They cost quite a bit for franchisees, but at that point in time, whoever was brought in added a lot of value in terms of the cost structures. Of course, now the franchisees earn quite a bit as well, so that much of it can be spent back into the sport. So very quickly, if you could kind of speak about that.
Well, I don't know what that has to do with Indian sport post-COVID, but
well, it's just my interest to understand the man who's run something like that.
Yeah, I'm just joking. Well, I mean, for me, okay, very quickly, the idea of getting team owners was not just to have team owners. And with due respect to every individual in our country, I didn't want just a Sharma and whoever else to be owning teams, because the entry price wasn't much at all. When I say it wasn't much at all, it's all relative. What's 100 rupees to somebody? Nothing. What's 100 rupees to somebody? 2 days of food. So, it's all relative. And being the kind of sport it was, and the fact that it was lying in the shadows for so long, obviously we could not have a major entry charge, because, people's belief was so limited at that point of time, if not completely absent. So yes, the entry was it was a very low barrier. But even there, the central thing was not how much to price it at. Obviously, it had to be low. But the fact that we wanted people's reputation in the sport. We didn't want just owners who would be relatively invisible. We wanted people who were reputed, who were acknowledged to be major Indian entrepreneurs, joining the game, becoming partners, becoming pillars. And that, once again, is related to respect, because their entry into the game meant respect to the game. The film fraternity is very, very well represented through the Bachchans. I owe a lot to Abhishek, and of course, all the rest of the people who came in as owners brought a lot of their reputation in, and that was what was necessary, not so much the money, because it had to be low. Also, some other leagues were beginning to happen in India at that point of time, apart from cricket. Even cricket was very new, by the way. The IPL was only a year or two old, or 3 or 4 years old at that point of time. I did know that, listen, let us not outprice anything, any part of this project, because much as sport and sporting leagues and sports team ownership must not be seen as major commercial entities. They must be seen as major developmental entities, which is, like I said, another aspect, completely different. And my latest, I suppose, there's a lot of noise somewhere, but anyway, maybe there's some, I don't know. Anyway, so we'll have to see. Is somebody else getting the static? Because there's a lot of, there, gone. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, so every aspect of the league had to have a certain cost control to it, because I saw that other leagues were trying to copy cricket, and you can't, because cricket's a very different kind of beast, and player fees were rather high elsewhere, or the home and away situation was killing people. So I said we must try and get the Pro Kabaddi League to fit into a very a box that doesn't hurt anyone. And I think those decisions were of great help, because if you outprice anything at that point of time, obviously it's going to be either not accepted at all or a very, very slow trajectory. But because our economics were the best possible at that point of time, I think it mattered a great deal that, not only were the viewership figures very high, but the costs were also very low. So, plus, I mean, have the cake and eat it too.
Well, that's wonderful. We have a question coming in from Pranav Pvt, who says, how will Kabaddi be played? Because it's more of a contact sport in the post-COVID world, so to say.
Well, I mean, the post-COVID world is going to be the pre-COVID world in a few months from now. How much time? We don't know. I can't predict that, because I know the medical professionals will have to put their ultimate stamp on that date and time. Some sports will suffer more in terms of the time taken to go back to normal. Some sports will try and work their way out with a certain level of desperation just to keep going. And I realize that wherever commercials are very high, that's my thought, in the current and the post-COVID world, they'll be the ones who are desperate to get back. Because, there are so many commercial partnerships going, and you have to try and do something, throw your hands around, try and get some level of, sorry, your thing is back again. Thank you, Nikhil. So, the sports that have a very heavy commercial level of partnership will necessarily need to innovate and come back quickly, because they can't afford to lose that high magnitude of commercial support. Those sports that have very little going for them don't really care too much anyway, because there wasn't such a high stake in any case. So, sports that don't have a professional league or have smaller events through the year, or just a national championship, or, where there's not much money involved, will probably say, well, all right, we weren't doing too well anyway, so, we'll just wait it out till we can get back to normal, because there's no sense kind of flapping around and changing our game or changing the way it's perceived. Some sports in the middle, of course, are going to be much more affected, because they were all kind of trying to climb the ladder commercially. And they are the ones who are going to be most hurt, because they don't have the strength at this point of time to try and retain that commercial partnership and try and offer a different kind of game. Because, I mean, even cricket, for instance, no saliva, no this, but they're desperate to try and come back, because the commercials are so high and you can't afford to disappear for, say, a whole year. Kabaddi, in that sense, is unfortunately going to suffer, because it's an out-and-out contact game. Now, we can all talk about the fact that if you are inside the stadium, you've been tested, you're okay, you're not positive, you're negative for the virus, then why can't you be allowed to carry on your trade, or in this case, play or watch? But I know those are only theoretical situations, because the government and the health authorities have to have the final say. So we will just have to wait it out. There's no sense now. Of course, at the junior level, like in rugby as well, there's something called touch rugby, where you don't tackle fully. Similarly, in kabaddi, for the younger generation, for school kids and what have you, there's touch kabaddi. You don't have to tackle, and you don't have to fall, and you don't have to break. Now, that can happen at the school level. But in terms of full contact, there's no choice. We can't now reinvent the game to make it non-contact. It is a contact sport. I mean, you can't have shadow boxing as a tournament. There's no shadow boxing tournament. You can keep that alive as a gimmick, but we don't want a gimmick. I think we just need, the operative word is patience. And if it takes 1 month or 1 year, we have to wait it out. I think there has been enough progress made in kabaddi and many other sports, and that progress must not be allowed to shake with a sense of great impatience. Oh my God, we've got to get back. I mean, kabaddi has existed for the last 4,000, 5,000 years. And the next few months, if there's a, if it's possible not to have kabaddi, it's not going to get blown away. It's not a new fad that, oh, we love this fad, now there's not there for 6 months, we don't want it anymore. I mean, it's a thing for the millennia. I mean, it's a thing forever. So why this impatience to rush back? For me, I think the operative word in the world of sport right now and post-COVID is patience. Not to knee-jerk, not to panic, not to get back, because all the commercial support that came to various sports, let's talk about the commercial side, came because there was what's the word? There was a relationship. What's the word when it's porous? Somebody help me out. When you go in and
Absorption?
Osmosis, absorption, whatever. It helps both sides. It helps the sport that there's commercial support, and the commercial support gets their own benefits through the sport. So it's not a charity situation, and that relationship will happen again whenever it's allowed to happen. I don't know how many months from now. I mean, I'm guessing, say, by the end of the year. But we don't know. This virus seems to be getting the better of everybody in terms of, its movement. But when it all comes back, let it all come back. Why the impatience? Sports is a habit, and it's a good habit. It's a great habit to play in terms of health and fitness and what have you, and it's a great habit in terms of watching. So that habit will return. I don't think it's going to disappear. So if you like eating certain foods and they're not available for 9 months because they're out of season, lychees, I love lychees. Lychees are not there for the year. They come now in June, late May, June. That's it. Then they disappear. So it doesn't mean that in December I say lychees, no, I don't know, I'm not fond of the fruit. I don't know. If it comes back next June, I may not want it again. No, you'll wait for it. It comes back and you accept it. I don't know about an example, but it just came to my mind now. That's
a very interesting example. In fact, staying on with Kabaddi and leagues that are slightly like Pro Kabaddi, which are slightly smaller. Hur has a question here for you. We'd like Hur to come on and ask that. He basically wants to ask about how the smaller leagues or smaller sports will survive. And you've just touched upon it briefly. It'd be great if Hur, are you there? We'd like you to ask your question.
Yeah, hi guys. Just want to check, am I audible? Can you guys hear me?
You're very good. Let's go.
Or by the time you were waiting, your beard's grown. Go for it.
Again, apologies for the look. And so I'll just introduce myself. I'm Hur Jafar. I work with Patna Pirates, the Kabaddi team in Pro Kabaddi League. I run the operations and the marketing along with a two-man team. I think my question is sort of now redundant, where you just put the patient word on it for all the sport. But my idea, in fact, was the other way, where I was looking at, to capitalize on the TRP, because every sport is generally like football, which has now started with empty stadiums, a contact sport eventually, no matter how many norms they try and bring up, where distancing and the substitutes sitting further apart. But regardless, people are still tackling, people are still going to touch each other. And likewise for Kabaddi, where I felt the gate receipts don't really matter that much till now, even till date. You would have that much before in the pipeline than IPL was what I thought. So I figured you'd know a little bit better as why that wouldn't be the case in this, because again, a smaller operation team compared to cricket, which is massive in terms of setting up the stadium, pitches, everything. And a one stadium thing could work very well with 12 teams quarantined in one city, going to the stadium. So I actually thought that PKL should act on it to get the TRPs, which have been dropping for the last couple of seasons, and go ahead with it rather than later.
Well, no journey is really smooth, and you talk about the PKL and ratings and what have you. They'll keep bubbling along till they sort of settle, if that at all, because nothing really settles in life. But what kind of leadership do you want to present? And I'm not taking the decisions here from Mashal or Star. That's up to them, and I'm sure they'll take very wise and considered decisions. But it's a thought that what kind of leadership would you like her if you were in charge? Would you like the kind of leadership that says, listen, we need to think of the larger good? Or are we seeing only typically what I can do for my team and my players? No, there's a larger good here. And the larger good is that if the nation is requesting, or governments or the health officials are requesting this kind of physical distancing, then should we be leaders there and say, yes, we believe that we don't want to offer the possibility of taking this virus forward. We want to sit back till people tell us it's absolutely safe. Why? Because we know inside that our sport is here forever. It's not going to disappear. And the short-term desperation of TRPs or this commercial partner or what have you is secondary to the larger good of the nation recovering quickly, getting rid of this virus, maybe comes through a vaccine, and then we will pick up the pieces again, because we are confident that our game will last well beyond a virus. Or are we now so desperate that, a virus or not, let's kind of get into it Maybe we can have only virtual or two sides meeting and sort of, doing a little haka or what? Why reinvent the game, and why take the God forbid possibility that something goes wrong in terms of the virus, and then we are held responsible for what? Desperation. If we wait it out, I think we'll possibly set the right example by saying we listened to good advice, we listened to the government, we listened to the health authorities, and we are strong enough to bounce back when possible. So, there are many schools of thought, and I would rather play the safety thought here. I'd rather be a safety leader than show my desperation and show my lack of trust in the game bouncing back when the time is right.
Yeah.
I think
that's about it. Yeah.
That's really nice thought, Charu. Djokovic just recently mentioned that there are about 95% of tennis athletes, predominantly at the lower end of the spectrum there, who aren't really currently making any money, and that's really tough for them in terms of the financial situation. Where would you place the whole landscape with regards to athletes and people whose lives are dependent on businesses that are allied to the sport? What is the international scenario like, and how do we place the Indian scenario there to this COVID situation that's prevalent all across the world? And it is for real. You're right. There's no vaccine as of today. We don't know if it will be there tomorrow or day after, or when is it going to come. How does the scenario look like to you and going forward?
Yeah, so there are two kinds of, to put it very in a very elementary fashion, there are two kinds of sport, and both kinds of sport are equal in terms of effort and energy and time and everything else. But one is unrewarded, and the other one has a professional circuit which is rewarded, remunerated. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are in an unrewarded sport because you're likely living on a job or whatever else. Say if you're a swimmer, where's the profession? You win a race and you get what, $100,000? No, nothing. You get a medal which is worth nothing. So there are many sports, and I don't mean any disrespect to swimming because it's my sport or any other sport, which have no profession attached to it, no livelihood. So, when you talk about professional sport, yes, it's a different kind of sport. Let's deal with the non-livelihood sports. What's the difference? The difference is that you don't have enough tournaments, and your practice schedules are all cast asunder. They're all gone a little crazy. But there's no loss of livelihood, as it were, because you weren't making a livelihood on the sport anyway. So that's one category of sport. And to my mind, that doesn't shake up much, because life carries on till you can play again, because again you will train, again you'll go for a medal. If you are in a country which rewards medals, and largely it's a developing world that rewards medals, because there's no other profession. What you do, you say, oh, you won a medal, here's a few lakhs, But in developed countries, you get nothing. You might be a Pan American Games medalist. It doesn't mean the government says, oh, here's something for you and here's a medal, and nothing. You just get back to it. So developed countries have different situations because people have some kind of a job. You may be waiting tables at a McDonald's or whatever and be a champion. So who knows what you're doing. And some prime examples I'll give you later. Now the other side or the other kind of sports where it's a profession. And I think whenever you play sport as a profession, there are many professional sports, golf, you mentioned tennis, Djokovic, many others as well, badminton now, where you're earning a living through sport. That's where it's really tough, because chances are you're not really earning on anything else. You're not waiting tables or whatever. But to my mind, one of the toughest kind of human beings are sports persons, because if there's anybody who realizes the value of hard work, really hard work being of value, it's the world of sport. And to my mind, the sports persons, therefore, should be that much more resilient rather than being frustrated, saying that we are the tough guys here, yeah, we can live this out. We must be role models to show the rest of the world, of many other professionals, that, okay, our profession's taken a bit of beating right now, but we will last. We're not the ones to crumble. We're not the ones to be frustrated and whine. We've got to last it out till we can start again. If the world of sports starts crumbling and saying, well, I've lost my livelihood, I can't play, and I'm getting, no money anyway, what about the rest of the professions? What kind of an example is the world of sports setting? Because the world of sport is almost always everywhere, plays a very important ambassadorial role. They're role model sports persons, regardless of whether you're top 4 or top 40 or top 400. You are in your own arena a role model,
Yes.
saying, "Oh my God, you've gotten to be 130 in the world. Wow!" And people are sort of behind you. Now, you don't want to be the kind of guy saying, "Look at me, I have nothing to do now." You don't want to be, spreading negativity. So, to my mind, I think the sports persons, in most countries, it's not too difficult to subsist, to basically have, do roti, do dhoti. So sports persons, to my mind, need to lead that initiative by continuing to show mental positivity, saying, yes, we're in a tough spot, but we can always do enough to be able to feed ourselves and keep going till it opens up again. Because if the sporting fraternity crumbles, let me assure you, it's setting a very bad example. Because a lot of people think that, sports persons are in a certain sense elite. And, you're not going to get too much sympathy from those who are barely eking out a living, saying, I've lost my job. And I was, working in a furniture store. I have nothing to do. And yeah, I look up to you because, even you have lost your, should we say, professional income as a sports person. But you're toughing it out here. And I look up to you, and I'm going to tough it out too.
Sure. There's another student of the program, Kushal, who I think has a very valid question. He talks about women sports. I think that's very, very important to kind of take up, because a lot of times that we talk about sports, unfortunately, invariably, our focus is always on the men's side of things. So, Kushal, if you're there, we'd like you to come up and pose your question for Charu.
And champion the cause of women, Kushal. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself first. I work for a not-for-profit sports foundation called Fossa Foundation. It looks to develop football at the grassroots level. I'm also pursuing the PILLAI FIFA CIES Sports Management Program. So there is some serious concern, with women's sports getting majorly impacted worldwide. And since organizations might go for a bare bones approach, which for a few years and focus on what's making most commercial sense. So do you think that whatever little progress that we've made in bridging the gap might be lost in this period, and how do we tackle this issue?
We tackle it with only one magic word, and I'm sure you have the answer. If you don't, I've mentioned it about 10 minutes ago, and I want that answer from you.
Patience.
Thank you. Full mark. 2 points.
No, thank you.
What's the point being impatient? What are you going to achieve? What's the point flapping around? Now, if women's sport, and which is a very important, aspect of our sporting world, it's 50% of our sporting world, has made progress. Say women's cricket in India has made progress. Badminton has. So many other sports have made progress. Wrestling, we win medals, in boxing, and if it's all set back, it's set back just as much as the men's world is set back. I don't think the men's world is going to come back much stronger than the women's world. Wherever they are, whatever level they are, they will reduce their level appropriately. And I beg your pardon, proportionately is the word. And if it takes, I don't think women's sport is going to bounce back slower than men's sport. Because I mentioned earlier, if you remember, those sports or those areas in the world of sport which are commercially very strong are the ones which are most desperate, because they want to keep that high level of commercial activity going. If, God forbid, don't take it from me, if women's sport in general is less commercially robust, let me assure you, it'll be hurt less, because, the dips will be a lot less. Yes, you may argue that it's taken us so long and so much hard struggle to get where we have the women in a certain sport, but their reduction is going to be less and the return is going to be just as soon as the men. In fact, in major successful commercial men's sports, that's where the biggest hurt is going to be, because, that's where the numbers are the biggest. So the amplitude is very big in seriously commercial sports, and the amplitude of the wave will be a little small when it comes to smaller sports or where commercial inputs are a little smaller. If we think that women's sports at this point of time, which may be a sad truth, has less commercial activity, let me assure you that dip will also be less.
You mentioned patience. Padmakshal here has asked us a question that deals with exactly that, and I think he believes that he says we need to start sports and games as it also improves your immunity, which will help fight COVID. What's your thought? And I know a lot of people, not just even elite athletes right now have a bit of a mental block. They're going through a little bit of depression is too strong a word to say. They want to start playing. It's their life, and a lot of people in the groups that we are have now started discussing, can we play that? Can we play that? There's some sports, of course, you can, some you can't.
Okay, Nikhil, the answer that I can think of is, what is the lowest common denominator of the world of sport which leads to immunity or protection from diseases and what have you? Is it achieving an Olympic gold, or is it in the physical training that you do? What is of health value?
Training. I would assume it's training.
So training is something that a lot of people are doing at home, or now as things open out, they are going out in parks, and now sports stadia are open in India. The training is starting again. So I don't see why sports persons at this point of time cannot lead the way in ensuring that, yes, you're absolutely right. Immunity has to be developed. Fitness and health is a very important aspect of that. And sports persons will continue to lead the way, not by whining and saying that I'm not being able to train and my Olympic gold may be in question, but by saying I'm training, I'm working hard, I'm staying at home, I'm not doing 45, I'm doing 450 push-ups. And guess what? I've added, all this sort of other fancy freehold exercises to my regimen, or I'm adding some yoga to it, or I'm doing some more flexibility. I mean, those are the things that help us keep better health and get better immunity, not just because of the fact that my training has been halted and therefore I may not win the high jump gold. No, your high jump gold, silver, bronze, or the fact that you finished now 10th and you could have finished first, or that you finished 100, or that you're not qualified for the Olympics is very important, but that's not why you develop immunity. You develop immunity because you're in better health and because you're able to indulge in fitness activities and lead the way once again as role models for living a healthy life. So there's nothing preventing people from fitness-related activities now, even if earlier it was only at home. Now it's a little more open. But yes, you can argue that their training for the highest level, or their pinnacle of achievement, has been for the moment set back a bit. But why should they be in any way be less immune or lower their immunity because they are not training? Training is free. Technical training is different, which of course is sport related, but basic training for health or basic health related, fitness related activity, why should that have stopped?
I hope, Padmakshan kind of takes that advice and waits a little bit more. Here's a question that I know that you must be getting quite a bit, maybe not so COVID related, but Rajendra Deshmukh says, "Dear Mr. Charu Sharma, what is your advice to people who wish to become sports commentators?"
Oh boy, yeah, ये सब लंबी कहानियां हैं. But I well, it's very basic here. The unfortunate part of that. Sorry, what's the name again?
Rajendra Deshmukh.
Rajendra, the unfortunate part is that opportunities in the world of commentary in India and certain other underdeveloped nations is still very low. The opportunity is very low. That's because we don't have a full pyramid. We have only a pinnacle. We have only a peak where at the very highest level, international channels or major sports channels have commentators. And lower down the pyramid, there are no opportunities at all. Now, in developed nations, there are many other sports that get covered at a lower level, and all of them require commentators, commentary. So there's a sort of a pyramid that you can rise at. Here, it's either right at the top or bust, virtually. There are more options opening up in terms of different languages for various sports now. In Kabaddi, as you know, there are 4 or 5 or 6 languages, and cricket as well now more languages. So that language option is increasing the number of opportunities, but that's only a language scenario. So one, the opportunities are very few, and it requires an enormous amount of patience and energy and effort and perseverance to try and get to a commentary spot. But how can you be a good commentator is something I can spend 30 seconds on. Very immodestly, I beg your pardon. But so step one is the deeper the knowledge of the sport you want to commentate on. If you are happy to be multi-sport, like I'm happy to be, then it requires a lot of knowledge, deep knowledge about various sports, and it helps if you play. If you're playing those, then it's not theoretical knowledge, because that can be picked up. You can be very good at theoretical knowledge, but you need to be practically playing those things. I know it's not possible to play everything, but play as much as you can, because that gives you the kind of sort of additional subtlety in terms of the terminology used or whatever else is required to let people know, he knows, he plays. That's very important. So depth of knowledge in the sport is like an ocean. I don't know how anybody can ever achieve perfection. You can't, but you can achieve a lot of depth. Secondly, of course, and by the way, this is my favorite topic, so once again, I can go on and on, but I must not. Secondly, of course, is the process of communication is done by what? Nikhil, when we communicate, what is our tool?
Language.
Thank you. Again, 2 out of 2. Well done. 2 points. Because language is what we need when we communicate. Now, a lot of people have a great deal of depth of knowledge of sport, but if you don't have an equal depth of knowledge of the language you wish to commentate in, then we fall short. Because we stick to cliches, we say the same things all the time, we don't change our terminology, we, become staccato, we become people other people might not like to listen to. You might have a lot of knowledge and reputation in a certain sport, but if your language knowledge and if your width of the language, if your phraseology, or if your pronunciation and all the rest of the vocabulary is inadequate, then you don't become a good person to listen to. So the attention on language has to be virtually as much as the depth of knowledge of the sport, and only then can you. I mean, for instance, you must be able to, in terms of sheer language, look around you right now at a tree or at a scenario or at the screen here and speak for 2 minutes extolling the virtues of what you see, describing it in sort of great detail, and then using your phraseology or your knowledge of the language to make it really appealing for somebody to listen to you describing a computer, saying it's this fabulous rectangular machine with lots of little marked keys, and then it's all magical anyway because you press something and something else comes up and you can eliminate people and whatever else you want to do. That breadth, that depth of knowledge of the language knowledge needs to be there, because without that, we feel that we know a sport a great deal, but are unable to express it in various pleasurable ways. Because as a commentator, if you're not able to enhance the picture and the whole optics for me, why am I there anyway? Then people just mute you and say, I'm watching the picture anyway. Don't describe that to me. Give me something, else, something new. Put it intelligently. Have a sense of humor. Do something different. So there's a lot more to commentary than just knowing the sport. You need the language is the key, and most people in our part of the world falter because the knowledge and depth of the language is unfortunately inadequate. So please, pay a great deal of attention to that. There are many ways of improving your knowledge of a language, whichever language, by the way. It could be Tamil, it could be, it could be any language. So that's what you really need to focus on. And the rest is really, experience, and time will teach you what have you. And many people talk about quality of voice and what have you. To my mind, it's a very important part of being a good commentator. It is your dog, isn't it, Nikhil? Somebody's dog anyway.
No, it's not my dog. It's we have a few outside, and those they don't want me to be famous.
Just kidding. So yeah, I mean, the world of commentary has those two very heavy oceans. Knowing the sport as well as you possibly can, which means constant homework and improvement, and knowing the language as much as you can, which means constant improvement in the language as well. Put things differently all the time. Don't fall into the same cliches. And then
you mentioned something very interesting, though. You spoke about hyperlocal. You spoke about Tamil. I don't think those were the options when you started out. So English and Hindi predominantly were the languages. But now with simulcast and so many different languages, is that an option for people to kind of say, I'm a specialized Malayali commentator and I'm a Tamil commentator? Do you see local content being so popular that people could make a career out of those?
Absolutely. It's just, it's the networks, the number of networks that we need. I mean, we have only 2 major sporting networks, and that's our biggest problem. Well, maybe 3 now. So unless there are more options, the same network only for very well-funded projects can have commentary in different languages. But yes, I think language is something that, you can excel in one, but it's very, very difficult to be a commentator in multiple languages, because it takes a lot out of you to come up with pleasing language, with attractive language in a matter of a microsecond in different languages. Because remember, it's all spontaneous. You can't be prepared. You can't be learning things. You can't have prepared a speech or whatever. It's got to be whatever's happening at that point of time. So your fluency in that language has to be so high. I don't think it's easily possible. Maybe, I don't know, 1 in many, many millions to be equally fluent, commentary fluent in a couple of languages. You can be fluent, but maybe not commentary fluent, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. We have a question from Satish Nair. He says, so we are seeing sports stakeholders in India getting together to mitigate sufferings of small-time players and support staff. Any such localized story of help that you're aware of? Anything that you've heard of? Sports stakeholders and groups supporting players at the lower level, staff.
I think federations and institutions are doing that, trying their best to make sure that the lower levels are the ones who are looked after most, and the upper levels, which are very few anyway, can take a serious cut in their remuneration. But obviously not enough, because the sporting industry in India is not that large anywhere at this point of time, and a lot of it's actually government oriented. Now that hasn't suffered because all the people are still equally, employed at the government. There's been no reduction or nothing. But you mentioned looking after the lower levels of sporting staff. Like I said, there's some work going on. But once again, I think we have to see the bigger picture. And the lower levels of Indian society at large is where help needs to go. Because we can't keep seeing things by such a myopic lens. Me and my industry and my staff. I think there are a lot of other people, and the world of sport also is involved in ensuring that their generosity and their give is to the lowest level of economic society, because that is the one that really needs sustenance at this point of time. And so to my mind, I think we need to have broader horizons and spend our time, effort, energy, money in supporting those who are at the very lowest end of the pyramid. And if that means that some staff in a sporting environment are really lower than low, subsistence, not knowing if the food's going to come tomorrow, that's where attention needs to be given. And it's up to us to realize that, listen, I may be at a certain lower level in the world of sport, but guess what? I can still exist for a month on what I have. There are people who can't live till tomorrow on what they have. So, I think it needs to percolate all the way down to the lowest level of economic society in India. That's where help must begin first and then rise.
Sure. I think Kushal has another question on behalf of Anand. Kushal, would you want to come on and put that question across?
Yeah, sure. So Anand, who works for Rugby India, he had a question asking a plethora of sports organizations are, back to the drawing board when it comes to restructuring the commercial and sponsorship deliverables. So he would just like to hear your thoughts and advice on what these organizations can now, offer in order to justify the value that corporate sponsors are investing in.
This is a tricky one, and obviously I don't have all the answers, but I will say this, that your dealing with commercial partners has a direct relationship with your desperation level. If you are suggesting that we now cannot exist without a sponsor or some kind of, a commercial input coming in, then you will possibly have to reduce your offer to the lowest level and give such a supporter, let's call it a sponsor, tremendous value by saying that, we wanted 100 units from you and that's what we had. Now we're happy to take 10 because we have to somehow carry on. To my mind, that may not be the wisest, because it's better to lie low and say, if my value proposition was 100 units 3 months ago, and it could well be 100 units 9 months from now, why should I lower it to 10 units just because I'm desperate to take those 10 units now? Can I exist for another few months, let things get back to virtually normal, and get my 100 units back? Because that's what I'm worth, and that's the worth that I'm giving the person who's giving me 100 units as well. Why should I have a substandard offer now unless I'm absolutely desperate? So my call would be that if at all possible, avoid the desperation, because then you're selling yourself too cheap. And whoever is your sponsor, whoever comes in with those 10 units is going to take 100 pounds of flesh, not 1 pound of flesh. They'll say, okay, you're now desperate. I will give you 10 units and I will want a 10-year contract for 10 units. Are you going to sign that just because you're desperate now? I suggest you retain your original value, more or less, and wait it out. Because after all, people are giving you money because they also see some benefit. And let that benefit, perceived benefit, come back to near normal before you continue with the commercial relationships. If it means those commercial relationships at this point of time seem to falter and die, so be it. Because when you're strong again, hopefully it'll come back to 100 units. That's where you want to be, because people will take advantage of those who are desperate. And how desperate are you? Can you not exist if you are a rugby organization or the organization of any other sport or anybody managing these events? Do you really want to sell yourself cheap because of desperation? And I can't speak for the level of desperation of various events or organizers or associations or federations. And those who are extremely desperate, I'm sorry, there's no choice. You'll have to reduce your value and get a commercial support. But let the people who are giving you commercial support also recover. In a few months from now, hopefully they'll be very strong as well. They'll, quarter to quarter or whatever. I mean, first quarter of 2021 might be pretty strong. And those guys are happy to give you good value because you've recovered as well. So operative word is patience, and the inoperative word is desperation. Your level of desperation will decide whether you need to offer your good value at a much lower situation with your commercial partners. I hope that's not the case for most people. Just write it out, please. Don't reduce your value.
On hashtag patience, we have another question, Charu. Aishwarya Mohan says, sir, you mentioned patience as a key, but how could a junior college level player keep in pace with the competition where team play is also as important as fitness in a game like football? So Aishwarya, patience is being questioned now. People are being impatient a little bit.
Repeat again, please, because Aishwarya, I'm glad that you've tuned in, but so what's that again?
Aishwarya says, sir, you mentioned patience as the key, but how could a junior college level player keep in pace with the competition where team play is as important as fitness in a game like, say, football? So I think what she means is,
I'm not really obtuse because I'm not getting it.
I think what she means essentially is that she can continue her fitness schedule, but it's also very important to play with others, to also have that control and work with the ball because it's a team play. So she needs people around rather than just her fitness drills.
Yeah, Aishwarya, I think I know you are. Thank you for writing this in. And it's not just football; it's also basketball and whatever else. Yes, you need teammates, and yes, you need opposition. But guess what? You don't have it at this point of time. So what are we going to do about it? I've said it right at the top of the show. Sports persons can't be the negative, frustrated lamenters. We can't be the ones cribbing and whining. We are the ones who need to show the rest of the world, hey, I didn't get people to play with or partner with, but guess what? I've kind of upped my fitness levels. I've done a lot more fitness work than I've done, like off-season work, for instance. I mean, tennis players, play, or badminton players play together the year round. Yet, November, December, about 2 months or so, month and a half, they have off-season. What do they do off-season? They train like crazy on their fitness and whatever else they may want to, or just sit back a bit and kind of clear their minds up a bit. Yes, we don't have people to play with in a team situation or play against in a team situation, but there are many other things that go into the world of sport. Fitness, for one, clear example is fitness. Can you, in this phase, not get fitter than you ever were because you didn't have that much time earlier on? Two, of course, can you see more matches? Think more strategically, see what was what, analyze a lot more. All these things are done without competition. You can just be alone or perhaps on the web with some other people and see previous matches and say, oh, is that how this is done? Oh, okay, get some clever ideas, get smarter in your own sport, get fitter in your own sport. And then when it all opens up, then you compete with each other and test those smart new ideas and strategies out. So there's a lot of work that can be done in the world of sport to try and get fitter and smarter in your own sport, and then test it out when you play together. But the last thing we want is a sporting community which is frustrated, bitter, and negative just because you're not getting what you were normally used to. Guess what? You got news for you, Aishwarya. Nobody's getting what they were used to at this point of time.
I think it's important, Aishwarya, you wait it out, as Charu was saying. I have a point here.
But the rest of the things that the world of sport involves is not just play against each other. It's fitness, it's thought, it's strategies, it's getting all sorts of tactics, confer with other people, talk to other basketball people, talk to other sporting people, pick up new ideas. I don't know, so many things. Keep your mind fresh.
I've seen it happen to some players, some athletes at the elite level, time off, which might be due to an injury, due to sometimes retirement, sometimes just taking a time off because they felt exhausted, tends to help athletes a lot. Sometimes they come back so strong and also very aware of what they're doing, what's the surrounding. Any examples that you could kind of, on the top of your head that you remember of athletes who've done better coming back after some time off? And this, essentially, we're discussing this as time off, an imposed time off.
Well, again, there are categories and categories of sports. As you mentioned, as Aishwarya mentioned, of course, in a team situation, it's very difficult because when you're off and recovering, when you come back, it's actually dealing with many other people, not just yourself. For instance, a Neeraj Chopra from India, can take, a year off because of his elbow problems, all the surgeries and operations, and come back. If he's rehabilitating well, can come back with even a better throw, maybe an 87, 88 meter throw. So yes, when you come back strong in your own sport, it's possible to develop according to your own schedule and come back stronger. When you're dealing with a team sport, sometimes, of course, what does happen is an injury plays a very debilitating role, not just physically, but also because when you try and claim your spot back, somebody else has already taken it because it's a team sport. So there you have to remain mentally very, very strong, because you're not really responsible for your, that sport is not for yours to keep for life. So when you come back, you have to sort of build your way back into a team. And that takes a lot longer. It takes a lot of, mental toughness. I mean, there's so many other, the typical Marwan Atapattu example of, not reaching the top and then 0-0 and then going back again and working hard through the ranks and coming back again. So many people in India have done it too, in a team situation where you get injured and you come back and you gradually have to fight for your spot again and again. Prithvi Shaw, injured, has to fight for his spot back again. So many other people. I mean, Sanjay Manjrekar was injured, which is why Saurav Ganguly got a spot in 1996. So these injuries, of course, sometimes can end your career. But if you want to work your way back, many times they make you mentally stronger, because you have to work your way back again. From being in a position of strength, you're down to virtually zero, and then you try and claw your way back. And that's what the world of sport is all about here. I mean, there's so many injury stories. We can spend all day again on it, of where people came back stronger. A little easier when you're in an individual sport, because you're responsible for your own progress. And especially if it's a measured or measurement sport. If you get injured and you're swimming and you were like 55 seconds for something, now you're 58 seconds, you can measure your progress back. But in team sports, it's a much, much more difficult challenge for you to get back your spot, or get back, because other people have moved in. And the team requires a very important reason to push out somebody who's taken your spot to get you back. So you got to work a lot harder.
What do you, with the Olympics now scheduled for 2021, hopefully they'll happen. What do you think India's chances are? Would somebody like Neeraj Chopra be in the reckoning for a podium finish? Even get India that elusive gold medal, or anybody else that you reckon can make it possible?
Well, yeah, listen, our expectations there need to be muted, because we are a nation that's growing daily in terms of our nationalistic tendencies. Rah, 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 India, India, India. And the average fan can so easily get overcharged, overexcited, and misled by people like us or the media or whoever else, saying, oh, wow, look at the Indians. Oh, wow, we can expect this, we can expect that. Realistically, I don't know how it's going to pan out in 2021, because, things change in a whole year. But we certainly had a medal hope with Bajrang Punia in wrestling, because he was the world #1. He was the best wrestler in this category. And, if a good draw, a good round, it all ends in one day, it could be his day, and there could be a medal expected there. I think PV Sindhu is also still very much in a medal mix, even though her ranking is not quite the same. But, she's up for the big game. She's done it before. And it's likely that we could get a badminton medal as well. There's every possibility that we could end up with one boxing medal as well, whether it comes to women or men. So that's 3. And of course, 2 others that I fully expect are from the world of shooting, which is not much in terms of visibility, because the sport, sadly, is not one where visually it's too appealing. So there's very little television. There's, you don't really know what's going on in the world of shooting. You read in the newspapers every once in a while, but you don't see it that often. But somebody as incredibly talented as young Saurabh Chaudhary, who's only 17 now, he'll be 18 then or whatever, is just a fabulous pistol shooter. He and maybe one of the girls, maybe Manu or whoever. So maybe 2 or even 3 medals from shooting. So my medal tally would not be realistically more than 5. But if it's more, won't we all enjoy it? We'd love it. But if we say 10 and we end up at 7, people are going to say, well, we didn't do as well as expected. So my expectation, it's what is it? It's hope for the best, plan for the worst. So I'm saying 5 at a minimum, but if it can rise by another, because, we sit here in our own little bubble thinking about how well we are doing. Do we spare enough time to really see how well the rest of the world is doing? Because, the rest of the world is not sitting around stagnant. They're also working very hard. They're also improving. They're also trying to do their best. And, it's the best in the world, the Olympics. So I say a minimum of 5, and I've just mentioned where. But, I'll be the happiest if I'm proven wrong. Not wrong, but if they do a lot better, and you get 7 or 8 medals. but really not more than that, because I mean, we are a very young sporting nation in terms of the time and attention and money that we are putting into the world of sport. So if we're putting so little in, by what right are we expecting so much out of it?
That's fairly similar to how we, in the footballing circuits, every turn of every decade say this is the decade that we're going to the World Cup. And unfortunately, I don't think we're anywhere near that, because the world's running at a different pace and our pace just doesn't match up to it. We'll move on to the next section, really, which talks about way forward. And I'd like to start it off with a question from Subodh Bagayatkar. And he says, will sports and watching sports ever be the same again in the world? And uses the word scarred by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, we talk about COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, you know, Subodh, I could just go back 50, 60 years to the 1940s. You talk about a COVID scar. What about the Second World War scar? I mean, that was a scar and a bloody half. Can you imagine what the world was going through at that point of time? Has sport recovered? Is that not a distant memory? What about the 1980 Olympics, you know, scarred by a whole lot of people boycotting? What about 84, a whole lot of people boycotting? What about so many other major catastrophes in the world of sport? You know, Munich 72, the shooting or what have you. I mean, at the Olympic Games, what a massive scar. Has the world not recovered? The world always does. So we need to probably have a positive frame of mind here, saying that yes, we're facing this pandemic. Countries are fighting the pandemic in every possible way. Everything is more accelerated now. I mean, if we could develop a vaccine in 10 years, 40 years ago, we'll probably develop a vaccine in a year at this point of time. And 50 years from now, God forbid, if there's another pandemic, maybe in 5 days we'll come out with a new vaccine, because that's how the world's accelerating. So to my mind, once again, it's very important for us to realize this is a temporary situation. People keep talking about the new normal. I'm saying a year from now, I hope people will forget what does the term new normal mean, because everything is back to normal. So a year from now, we'll be saying back to normal, not new normal. Yes, of course, we can learn many lessons. I'll wait for Nikhil to ask me a few questions. There are many lessons we can learn. But, you know, typically all of us are creatures of habit, and we try and go back to what's most comfortable. And at this point of time, if, for instance, all of us are focusing much more than ever on cleanliness and civic sense and what have you, and, you know, you can't spit here and can't do that there. I hope a year and a half from now, when there's no sign of any pandemic or whatever, or COVID, you know, people don't go back to spitting in every corner and what have you, because that'll be such a shame. But, you know, humans, I mean, habit is a very difficult thing to kick.
Well, moving on, we have a very interesting line of thought by two ladies. One, of course, is Gauri here, who's going to ask, and a question has come up from Dr. Nivedita Shreyans as well. It talks about esports, and Gauri, of course, has a question on esports. And while, let me read out what Dr. Nivedita said, and then, of course, I'll allow Gauri to come up and ask that question to you. She says, Charu sir, what is your opinion about the esports industry now after the post-COVID impact? And what we do is we wait for Gauri to also ask a question, because I know it's something very similar. So Gauri, if you're around, we'd like you to come up and ask that question. Gauri, are you around?
Gauri, I can't hear you.
No, we still can't hear you.
This is tragic, Gauri. You've been waiting for so long.
Hi, can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Yes. Wonderful.
I'd like to start with a small introduction. I'm Gauri Pavai, Senior Project Coordinator. I'm a student of PILLAI FIFA CIES Executive Programme. So looking at the current situation, I mean, there has been a surge in the consumption of esports in any other online gaming platform. Do you think brands would be more interested, more keen in investing into esports other than any traditional sporting event? Like, what's your say in this?
Well, I'd like to begin by saying, Gauri, you need to, your stick is kind of scratching like hell. Okay, good, great. There's a little connectivity issue there or whatever. Look at me, you know, I'm hopeless in this, but anyway. So the quote is, whereof I do not know, thereof I do not speak. And in terms of the whole e-world, I'm clueless because I mean it's not my world at all. The fights I've had with my kids when they were kids and with everybody else around saying, get off that damn console and get off the video game, because get to real life, play, go out there, absorb the sun. And, but that's just a personal bias. I do beg your pardon, Gauri, and everybody else's pardon who are involved with esports, because I'm like, on esports, I'm a very distinct fat 0 on 100. I have no clue. I've never played. I've never gone. I mean, you cannot imagine how clueless I am on the whole concept of esports, because for me, it's an anathema. It's like, oh, if I could only get people, out of this whole e-business and out into the real business, we'll be talking. So having expressed my angst against the whole e-sport business, yes, you are right. And who was it earlier?
Dr. Nivedita.
Dr. Nivedita, you are right. Esports is very much something that the world will now gravitate towards, particularly because of the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, there was a lot of attention being given to esports because of the magnitude of participation or viewership. Because anybody who has access to some kind of a smart instrument or some kind of a digital thing will probably be able to take part in some manner or the other. I just wonder if it's more fad oriented, because what do people really want? I mean, for instance, when you go and see a movie in a screen, to my mind, sorry, it could be a wrong example, it's just my example, it's got a flavor to it, it's got a size to it, it's got a magnitude to it. When you see it on a smaller screen or on a laptop or on a phone or on a little chip here, I mean, can you imagine seeing a movie which is meant for that come down to this? And which is why esports to me is something that represents the smallest form of sport. The biggest form is out there when you go and see it in a big stadium or in a big arena and you play it yourself and you're participating and you're sweating and that's what traditional sport has all been about. It's changing. Yes, it's changing. I'm going to be left out of this revolution, that's for sure, because I mean, I'm a little past a certain kind of threshold. I'm not gonna, I don't know, maybe things change in my mind. But yes, it's a thing of the future. I'm just not so sure of its sustainability, because people may eventually want to go back to do the real thing. About sponsorship, sponsors are no fools. Commercial entities are no fools. They will realize that, yes, I mean, this is something that will happen regardless, unless, of course, systems crash, God forbid. Then your whole, if, for instance, there's a virus in the world out there and we're all suffering, what if there's a virus on your esports screen? Finished, correct? What's going to happen then? So I think there are some pitfalls there as well, but there is no question that at this point of time, esports will have a very low threshold of commercial partnership, and you'll get a lot of people rushing to support the esports platform because, one, they'll get it cheap, two, they think it's a lot more sustainable. I just think it's more faddish. And fads, as you know, some fine restaurant in your area, 2 years later, you say, where's that restaurant gone? Why? Because it was in fashion then. Now some other restaurants in fashion. So I'm not into things that are fashionable because they come and go. I much prefer solidity, which to my mind is the traditional form of sport. But, I could be wrong there because, I know very little to nothing about esports. All I know is many people seem to get to it, the younger generation certainly. And if the younger generation is leading the world, then esports is it.
Charu, very interestingly, I was part of a conversation recently where the gentleman narrated that Netflix now has 40 million subscribers in India at an average subscription rate of around 600 rupees a month. That's a staggering 2,800 crores of business that they've generated, a lot of which they're putting back into content. And there've been nerds who've suggested 100 years on, there might not be a football, there might be people plugged in, sitting at the sides, and everything is a projection of things. But sports, as we know it, is essentially about, it's very gladiatorial. That's one of the insights that helped PKL grow. So it'd never be sports if that tribal feeling of going out and competing hand to hand with somebody doesn't exist. Do you think over a period of time, just from an insight point of view, that that virtual world can ever take over what humans really like, which is touch and fight and that whole raw feeling of being?
Well, there's some record, some kind of, even if it's mythical, but there's some record of humanity going back to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years. and they're the ancient Olympics that started out before BC, and so on and so forth. So there's a very large, in terms of years, thousands of years of physical activity and sport lending itself to a very attractive offer of actually participating and or spectating. If that hasn't changed for thousands of years, to my mind, I think it's a perennial offer. It's a forever offer. It's a universal offer, and sport in its traditional frame will probably continue to be a fantastic offer. But it may be supported more and more so by some kind of e-sport or by virtual sport. But virtual sport cannot take over sport. It can play an additional role. It can play an even bigger role, but it cannot eliminate the regular world of sport, because that has a different kind of physical, real pleasure rather than some kind of virtual participation. Because, I mean, if half an hour ago we talked about can we increase our fitness and health and immunity and what have you? So are we going to increase that by sitting around with a pair of headphones and moving our thumbs or whatever else it takes, or not even moving our thumbs? What happened to all your immunity and fitness and health and what have you? Huh, Nikhil?
Yeah, not mine. I'm definitely very happy playing a lot more sport though. We have another
Gauri,
questions.
What about Gauri? What would you like to just sit in a room or maybe on one chair when you're born and when you die and just do e-life, only e-life?
Well, if Gauri is going to earn millions, she might.
E-food, e-life, e-clothes, e-what? I mean, how does it? Where are we going with that? I need Gauri's answer.
Gauri, you'd have to come back on and answer that if you're okay with e-food.
Or can I get your e-answer? Oh, you can't hear you. You got to check your earphone or whatever, system out. Go on. No, I can't hear you.
We'd come back to you, Gauri, because the questions are flying in. Go for it. Go for it if you're ready now. Go for it. No, Gauri, you lost your chance to answer it. We have questions flying in thick and fast. There's Parag who's saying, what's your thought, Charu, on players playing in empty stadium? Bundesliga has done it. The K-League in Korea has done it. So what are your thoughts on it? Empty stadiums and players playing in it. Is that the future of sport?
Well, we keep, there are many angles to look after. Once again, it's a commercial partnership. The German league has done it because they feel that they are safe enough. We keep talking about the players may not have the same feeling because they feed on the spectators. I don't think that there's a very small element of that, maybe 2-5%, because all in a professional scenario, players play because they know the worth of their game. They don't play because of spectators. They play because a thorough professional doesn't care whether he's playing in the middle of a forest or wherever else on the middle of a stadium, because for him, like the proverbial Arjun's eye is on, or aim is on the eye of the bird. A professional is not going to say, all right, I'm about to score a penalty, all right, I'm running in to score a football penalty, but hang on, there's no spectators, so I might as well miss it. Yeah, so this kind of complicated thought about, am I playing with spectators or not with spectators, or does the stadium have only 62% spectators or 29% spectators, is not in the mind of a professional. They play because of their own pride of performance. That pride of performance is going to keep this going. So whether they're spectators or not, the players don't care. Now, it doesn't matter to their performance. Of course they care, and it's nice to play in front of a lot of people. But in terms of spectating, in terms of viewership now, that's a very interesting aspect, because a lot of the viewers are casual viewers. Some are very committed viewers. Some are barely, involved. A lot of the middle chunk is casual viewers. They're watching because somebody else is watching, or because you say, oh, let me watch a beta. There's a very large section of casual viewership. A lot of that casual viewership is led because of the excitement of the spectating on the field. That's what excites them. Not so much the play inside, because you watch a bait, but if there's a lot of the sights and sounds of sport are what attracts a lot of viewership. That will be missing. So a lot of the casual viewership may drop off. Now, conversely, though, if you can't move about, and this is, of course, special to these times only, because later spectators will come back and hopefully the virus will go away. A lot of people who are not being able to move around, who would not have watched, will turn into casual viewers. Because where do I go? What do I do? Oh, well, might as well just watch a bit. I don't really like what I'm seeing, but I'll watch a bit. So I think the numbers that will drop off will be substituted by the numbers that come in because of nowhere to go. And therefore, television viewership, to my mind, will remain virtually the same. You could argue, of course, from both sides that because of lack of excitement on the field, I may not want to watch, but because of lack of options, some others will watch. And that number will remain stable. So yes, that's certainly a direction that sports go on, wherever the sporting authorities allow that. But remember, if, God forbid, there's any case of any kind of infection, what's the word here? Infection?
Infection.
Yeah, then, that sport or that league or that event might get a serious kick in the back saying, what were you thinking of when you decided to allow this? So it takes a very brave organization at this point of time to be able to continue its offering without spectators, because a lot of people are involved. It's not just 11, whatever, 22 people playing in a field. There's a lot of organizational help as well. As many of your panelists know, they're all working for various teams. There's a lot of staffing that is responsible for the match that's going on inside the field. So it's not just 22 people, it's like maybe 500 people or more. And you don't want, because the numbers are therefore larger, God forbid, if there's any kind of infection, any positive, case, then it would be a real serious setback. So yeah, it's a good buyer media, but it will take a very bold, brave organization to go with that, because you don't want to put people at risk.
Sure. I think we're at the fag end of the conversation, really. And, this is possibly the last question, because we move on to, your parting thoughts on how do you see this turning up. Sandipta Das here asks us, what are your views on sports being granted an industry status by Mizoram government? Do you think that's the way forward? Sports becoming an industry from, an entertainment or possibly just a mode for where it's still a fairly disorganized, if I may say so, barring a few sports. Industry status?
Absolutely, 100%. I don't know what has taken us so long. I'll tell you why. Because we're not a sporting nation. We don't realize the value and worth of sport in the development of a nation and in international acceptance of a nation. Sport plays a huge role. Sports persons are massive ambassadors at large wherever they go to play for a certain nation. So yeah, the point is, what do we gain by being appointed an industry? If there are many positives to be gained in terms of tax laws or in terms of infrastructure availability and whatever else that the government provides you as an industry, sports should certainly become one, should have become one years ago. But our nation's waking up very gradually to the worth and value of sport. And Mizoram taking the lead, all I can say is, salam and salute, because, that is, if it's going to come from within the states, fantastic. I think it should come from the center. We've got a ministry of sport. We've got a ministry of sport. Why don't we have an industry of sport? What is the ministry of sport looking after if not an industry? And by declaring it an industry, so much more can be done. I keep saying that the government is very deeply responsible for the world of sport, but not chiefly so, because it has extreme limitations. In a country such as India, there are so many other priorities, and sports therefore comes, unfortunately very low down that spectrum, because, people still need food and water to drink and clean water and sanitation and homes. We're a poor country at this point of time. And in poor countries, sports unfortunately has to take the back seat. And so if sports were to be given an industry status, it's my thought process that a whole lot of corporate support may start filtering into sport because of it being an industry. And the government then, my standard response here is that real estate, for instance, is who's the biggest real estate owner in this country? The government. And if they start releasing that towards sporting projects, I think much more will come in the world of sport. If there's relaxation in tax laws, if companies want to come and support sport as a sponsor and or as a a funder for an academy or starting out any other sporting project, high performance academies and what have you, or smaller training academies, they should be given tax-free status to take the world of sport forward. And we have to attract companies to come into the world of sport a lot more than we have in the past, because we can't keep leaning on the government. The government has a very small budget for sport because it needs much more money for many other infrastructure and other needs in India. And the corporate world is not being attracted to sport because there's not an industry being given all the benefits of an industry. So absolutely, it should be an industry, it must be an industry, needs to be an industry for it to now develop further.
That's wonderful. There's Pranav Pobati who's asking me if I was a fan of Northeast United. I think he's seen the jersey in the background. Pranav, I was a director with Shillong Lajongs between 2013 and 17. And by virtue of that, I actually signed Northeast United's inception documents. So that's from the first year that I was a part of Northeast United. We have a lot of questions, but I think it's important that this conversation now takes a parting thought from you, Charu. What are the opportunities like that present itself? Because I know all these questions, and people are enjoying listening to you so much that this could. We still have questions as I say that. People typing in, and thank you so much everybody for tuning in. There are students. Yes, Charu, you have something to say for it?
Yes, I do. My parting comments are not as important because they won't shake the earth. But if we can take one or two more questions, and I'll try and keep my answers very short. I think I'd rather do that than to bother to write in.
Let's try. So here's the thing. Now there are lots and lots of students that are coming in who want to be part of the sporting ecosystem. There's this course that now we've been part of it as well, the FIFA CIES PILLAI Executive Programme in Sports Management.
I'm going to cut this short very quickly, Nikhil. Opportunities in the world of sport for youngsters coming through the system by gaining a degree.
Yes.
In India, it's still very, very minimal. I understand that. And I want people who are taking to sports management to understand that it's not a standard industry at this point of time. And there are not millions of jobs. It's not like an IT job or a retail job or what have you. It is still connected to the word called passion. Because you're taking to sport because you don't think it's like a great employment avenue. No, you're taking to the world of sport because you have a feel for it, you have a heart for it, you have a passion for it. And unfortunately, what that happens is, passion doesn't always necessarily convert into great rewards. I mean, if you have a passion for music, it doesn't mean you're going to be a rock star. It means that you'll be playing music all your life in a very small organization, a small bar here, there, but it doesn't matter. As long as you're able to feed you and your family, that's okay because you're following a passion field. Similarly, in the world of sport, I think the remuneration is going to be pretty low to begin with because it's a very, very small, not even industry. It's a very small situation in India at this point of time. So while the opportunities are increasing, the remuneration is not very high. And you need to understand that saying, okay, I'm not getting paid very well. I'm working pretty hard, but guess what? I'm doing what I love doing. So if you want to play in the world of sport, you must love it. It's not a standard job. It's not like selling insurance, which you'll probably never love. Or it's not like, being a salesman or whatever. It's working in the world of sport. You need to be aware that it may not pay you too much, but stick with it because you're doing something you like every day of your life.
Vinay here has a very interesting question. Now that we've decided we'll take a couple more. He says, which indigenous sport do you see coming out of rural India and having the potential to stage a league of its own, given your understanding of Indian sporting ecosystem? So he's asking you for a tip, basically. There might be a competitor tomorrow.
Well, why not? Go for it, yeah. But it takes a lot to take a sport to a high level. And, we talk about the Kabaddi story, but I mean, we're only touching the tip right now because it's existed for thousands of years and it's done rather well for itself. It organized itself well. It got to the Asian Games as well. So it's not like it is an indigenous sport, yes, but it smartened itself up. It globalized itself to a certain extent, at least regionally, and therefore more could be made of it. So if we talk about other indigenous sports, Kho-Kho, of course, there's a potential league coming up. So it's a very vibrant, robust, physical sport. Maybe that may do well, but it's a very crowded space because ultimately when you want to do well, you need to be on television or on some visibility platform regularly with a very high level of production because people are spoiled. If you offer them a production that's not world class, people are not likely to take to it saying, well, I don't know, it's kind of, funny production. Maybe I won't watch it. So viewership is now getting more and more sophisticated. And therefore, the offer that you make of any sport that you want to take up has to be at a very high international level. That is the challenge. You can take up any sport, take it forward. I mean, from the US, for heaven's sake, what's it called? Ultimate Frisbee. They want now the Olympics. I mean, so any sport, indigenous sport or whatever, or some new sport can take off. But the offer needs to be sophisticated. So it's not which sport, it's the question of, can you make a sophisticated offer? Can that sport look, feel international and sophisticated? That's your challenge. And you can take any sport up.
That's wonderful. We'll go for the last question, Charu. This is from Ashwath Nair, who's also a student at FIFA CIES India. He says, and a very important, interesting question, one that resonates with me as well. He says, my question is, what is your advice to those people who are working in the sporting industry, but are inclined to become entrepreneurs in the sporting industry? Of course, he says, amidst this pandemic, but otherwise, if you want to be a sports entrepreneur, what should be what's your advice to them?
Well, there's no question that, in an industry where opportunities are few, if you get an employment somewhere or the other and you're smart and you pick up a lot of information, you absorb a lot of what's going on and you keep your eyes and ears open, chances are you're going to end up being an entrepreneur because opportunities are few. If the opportunities are many, one is happy to be employed in some, company or the other because there's so many opportunities to switch as you like. So what's happened in the world of Indian sport for the last 10, 15 years is a lot of youngsters have taken various jobs here, then the other. Within 2 or 3 years, I say, hey, where are you now? And so guy says, actually, I'm on my own. I'm doing this, that, and the other, or starting something out. Yes, there's plenty of scope to be an entrepreneur, but, be a little humble, if I can say so. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound a little old-fashioned now, because it's not possible to know everything very quickly. So just be a little patient, please. What's the word patience? Just be a little patient, please. Get as much experience as you can to get a sense that you actually know more, because I mean, an entrepreneur takes plenty of risks, and you don't want to take that risk if you're not completely aware of the Indian sporting scenario. Read it, see it well, absorb it well. What's an average time? I don't know, 5 to 10 years. You need that amount of knowledge to then be going out with a good idea and trying to pursue it. Not easy. If profit's your motive, it's going to be heartbreaking at times, but just be a little more knowledgeable than you think. I mean, if you think I'm okay now, take another 2 years. So just add another 2 years to whenever you think you're ready, and maybe things will work a lot more. Right now, of course, the situation is horrible because of the virus. But when it improves a year from now, if you think you've got enough in you in terms of knowledge, take another 2 years and then do what you want.
Charu, we have a question from Pranav as well. He's not asking it himself. He's let me know. He says, when do you envision sports coming back, especially the IPL? Everybody's waiting for the IPL.
Yeah, well, I think 2021 is going to be virtually back to normal, honestly. But yeah, the IPL, they're pretty desperate now because I mentioned the whole, if the bigger the commercial partnerships, the more the desperation, because they have to live up to that, thinking there'll be a big drop. People who are, dealing with 1 crore or 2, they say, okay, there's a little drop, we take it. Yeah, people are dealing with 100 crores, they say, oh my God, if there's a big drop, what happens? The problem is that, for the IPL to happen this year, the World Cup, T20 World Cup will have to disappear. So I think it's an ICC decision, not so much an IPL decision, that they say if the World Cup, if they feel is not something they can handle this year, then the IPL will certainly happen. But even there, of course, the sports minister is on record saying that, the IPL needs to go through the government. It's a government decision whether we'll open up or not. Is the IPL desperate enough to have a tournament without spectators? 1. 2, what about the overseas players coming? I mean, will they be allowed in India? Will they be quarantining and all that? I think that, once again, to my mind, I would not want to be desperate. Ride out this year, come back strong next year. Why reduce the offer this year just because of your desperation? But for the moment, there seems to be a 50-50 chance because Australia is also very tough on its laws and rules. And if they're not going to have a decent World Cup at the appointed hour, which is whatever, October, then if earlier that decision is taken that, no, we don't want the World Cup this year in Australia because it's too dangerous, we'll push it to next year, then I'm sure the Indian authorities will push, the Indian cricket authorities will push the Indian government to do an IPL this year. I don't want to see a truncated IPL. What's the point? Why reduce the offer? So to my mind, wait till next year, but I'm not running the BCCI.
Well, thank you so much. I think we've run way over time, but it was so much of fun just to converse with you and seeing the interest in people that posed all the questions. Thank you so much. Is there any final parting thought that you might have for us and for those students who are coming in at the program, which is the FIFA CIS PILLAI program.
Nikhil, I think I'm guilty of having said it all so far, so I wouldn't want to repeat myself. But I do want to thank, of course, Pranav for being there, and Dr. Pillai and Dr. Daphne Pillai as well. Selina, Dr. Selina Joy, who was also dealing with me, and of course Rima Ramachandran, who was the first one to contact me for this. Also the Pillai FIFA CIES Sports Management Institute, and also everybody else who tuned in. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I'm delighted that you allowed me a bit of time talking to people who love sport. And I can only say that once again, the world of sport at this point of time, in our part of the world, it's growing. The glass is half full. I'll repeat a few key elements, if I might. One, of course, the world of sport, whether you're just working in it or a professional sportsman or somebody playing sport for health and fitness, we need to lead the way. We need to be the leaders in terms of positivity. It's not easier said than done. It's actually true. Sportspersons need to have a large dose of positivity. So for me, the world of sports need to lead in terms of keeping negativity away. Let's not show frustration and disappointment and distress and depression and what have you. I mean, it's just awful to be around. So can we all be ambassadors of positivism is something that I'd like the entire fraternity today watching, and everybody else around, whoever your friends are. I mean, be positive, for instance. There's always a way out. There's always for instance, I used to climb mountains when I was a lot fitter. There's always positivity. You can't even take the first step. You think, oh my God, I'll never be able to make it. So, and the world of sports is a passion arena. I've already mentioned that. I'll say it once again, because a lot of people want employment in the world of sport. And that employment is not at par with other forms of employment. But even if it's below par, you will always be doing something you love. So that love for sports needs to lead you into a sporting employment, not the fact that it's just another form of employment. You might as well go and, I don't know, what else do people do? Make furniture, I don't know, anything, or sell some peanuts, I don't know. But if you're working in the world of sport, please, you do so only because you love the world of sport, not love the revenues. They will come. Gain enough knowledge, you can be a sports entrepreneur as well. But those are some of the key things I'd like to ensure that people take away. And of course, finally, something that's in great shortage in these times, patience. All you youngsters out there, particularly. I mean, no Rome was built in a day. No league is built in a day. Nothing is built in a day. No home is built in a day. So why would you be looking for situations that are built in a day? I mean, if you say, I've already worked there 18 months, man, I got to go somewhere. 18 months is nothing in terms of, the total time of your life. So just be more patient, absorb, learn, be positive individuals. And I'd be very happy that I know you, because you're a positive, patient individual. If you're not, what can I say? Don't call me.
That's wonderful. Charu, just before you leave, is there a candidate for this book in your any question that you thought deserved from the ones that were written on the YouTube channel? Any particular question?
Well, it's not going to go to some esports, that's for sure. Sorry, Gaurav.
And Nivedita as well. So the esports guys are not getting it.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's just a personal bias. What can I say? I'm old and biased. But yeah, where were we? Which is the one that got me stumped? Ms. Mohan, I think, got me stumped with her. What happens in team situations and what have you. So go for it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charu. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be with you discussing sports, and hopefully we will all come out stronger out of it. I just wanted to tell everybody who's attending that the next webinar is by Mr. Pierre Dupré, who's the Olympic Games Operating Director, and that's on June 4th and 5:30 p.m. And with that, this is a wrap here, and one of the best times I've had discussing sports with one of the leading sports management professionals in India. It's an absolute honor for me. Charu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil,
very kind and
for organizing the session. And thank you, Kushal, Gauri, for joining in. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I hope. Bye-bye. See you soon.
What do I do now?
You have to exit.